Hello, welcome to Retro Geek Computers. My name is Hans Campbell. Today I'm going to talk about the video toaster and how you can successfully set up your own video toaster system. NewTek made the video toaster and released it in 1990. The video toaster board was primarily designed for the Amiga 2000 computer and actually works best in that system. I've tried the video toaster in the Amiga 2000, the 3000, and the 4000 systems, and I've personally have discovered that the board does work the best in the Amiga 2000. There's just something about that computer that's different than the 3000 and the 4000. Something that the video toaster prefers, something that the video toaster likes about the Amiga 2000. So it does work the best in that system. That's been my experience. Now, before we continue, I would like to say that in this episode of Retro Geek Computers, I will only be talking about how to successfully set up your video toaster system. I will not be going into how to run the video toaster software. That is reserved for a later episode of Retro Geek Computers. Okay, so let's get started. So you want to run your own video toaster setup, or you've thought about it. You know, you've heard about other people talking about it. You've seen the video toaster in action in the movies, the news, the sports broadcasts, you know. And you were thinking, well, how does it all work? Okay, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to successfully set up a video toaster system. Now, that might sound easy, and it is basically easy, but a lot of people have emailed me recently and have called me on the phone and asked me questions, you know, concerning their toaster setup because they're having problems with it. They're having problems setting up their video toaster system. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about those problems and how to deal with them, how to correct those problems. Okay. First of all, I highly recommend using an Amiga 2000 with a basic toaster board, not the Video Toaster 4000 board. Okay, just the first version of the toaster board. The video toaster requires that your Amiga has 2 megabytes of chip memory. That is a must-have item. So if your Amiga 2000 computer only has 1 megabyte of chip memory, you will have to upgrade it to 2 megabytes. I don't care how much fast memory you have. If you only have 1 megabyte of chip memory, you will get out-of-memory errors when running the video toaster. Okay. Another thing that you'll need is a processor accelerator board. Because one thing I've discovered, the video toaster does not like 16-bit memory and 32-bit memory mixed. It likes either all 16-bit memory or all 32-bit memory. So I found out that the best way to do that is to just install a processor board, because you're going to need one anyway to speed up the toaster's operation. So I recommend at least an 030 board, but an 040 board would be better. The 040 board that I use in my own system behind me is Progressive Peripherals Software 68040 board that was specially designed for the 2000. And this particular board here has 32 megabytes of memory. Now, memory that's in processor boards is usually 32-bit memory, which is your faster memory than 16-bit memory. Okay, and 32-bit memory in general is always the first memory, is usually the first memory that's mapped in your system. So as long as you have a processor board installed with memory and you remove all of your 16-bit memory boards, you should be okay. This toaster should have a nice continuous stream of 32-bit fast memory, as well as the 2 megabytes of chip memory. Another board I highly recommend, especially if you're going to be using the Amiga 2000, is Commodore's A2091 board, SCSI controller board. Now, that board is actually one of the best boards you can use with an Amiga 2000. It's very reliable and very dependable, especially if you have the version 7.0 boot ROMs and the Rev 8 of the SCSI controller chip. You can finally go beyond that 1 gigabyte barrier, and it becomes the whole system, the whole SCSI chain becomes very stable, you know, and you know, problem free. You don't have any problems with it. Okay, now I do recommend installing the 2 megabytes of memory on the 2091 board, the SCSI controller board. Now, the video toaster will not see that memory. The reason is because the 2091 board uses that memory as a buffer for the SCSI drives. So even though that 16-bit 2 megabytes of memory is part of the 02 bus, you have to keep in mind that the 32-bit memory is always the first memory that is seen by the Amiga computer, or it should be the first memory that's seen, right after the chip memory. Okay, so the video toaster will usually only use the 32-bit memory. It'll just basically ignore the 2 megabytes of 16-bit memory that's on the 2091 board. Okay. You'll also need to have a time-based corrector board installed, because you will need that if you plan on using consumer level VCRs on inputs 2, 3, and 4 on the video toaster. Okay. Now, the time-based corrector board is only needed for VCRs that's hooked up to the inputs of the video toaster. A time-based corrector board is not needed for the output VCR, because you will be recording the work that you do with the video toaster onto an output VCR. Okay. Now, I recommend a 3-monitor system, and so does NewTek. Okay. The first monitor is your RGB monitor, like the one that's hooked on my system. The other 2 monitors do not need to be RGB. Okay. The preview monitor and the program monitor, or main monitor as it is later called, they could be just monitors for security systems, or little small 13 or 20-inch diagonal TVs with video inputs. They'll work just fine. Okay, but I do recommend having 3 monitors with your video toaster setup. Okay. I also recommend, okay, there's several versions of the video toaster software, starting with version 1.0, which was released with the original video toaster back in 1990. Then you have version 2.0 of the software, version 3.0, 3.1, 3.5, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3. 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, I believe, are CD-based versions of the software. I guess, you know, because the 3.0 version of the software comes on 45 disks, or 3.5. The 3.0 and the 3.5 versions, I believe, are on 45 disks. And I guess NewTek got a lot of complaints on doing the floppy shuffle with 45 disks, and you know how long that took. So when NewTek came out with the 4.0, or 4.1 software, I think it started with the 4.0 or 4.1, the 4.x software was released on CD-ROM. Okay. Now, of all those different versions of the video toaster software, I recommend the version 2.0 of the software. Version 2.0 of the software has everything you need to operate the video toaster, all the different fades and wipes and things that you need, and yet it's very easy to use, especially for beginner toaster users. It's very easy to learn how to use that software. One thing I noticed from watching the Video Toaster Essentials tapes is that even Lee Stranahan, who is considered to be one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to the video toaster, I noticed while watching the videotapes that even he prefers an Amiga 2000 with the basic video toaster installed and the version 2.0 software, because he did 2 sets of the Video Toaster Essentials tapes. The first set of tapes were basically on a setup just like the setup I have here with the version 2.0 software. And I noticed as I was watching those tapes, he had a gleam to his eyes. He was constantly smiling. He was excited about the video toaster and the software and about teaching you how to use that software. As I was watching the second set of the Video Toaster Essentials tapes, which mainly deals with the Amiga 4000 and the Video Toaster 4000 board, plus the 4.x software, I couldn't help but notice that Lee Stranahan, the gleam was gone from his eyes. The excitement was no longer in his voice. And just judging from his general body language and his facial expressions and his eyes, I could tell that he really preferred using an Amiga 2000 with the video toaster, the regular video toaster board installed, with the version 2.0 software. That was his favorite. That was his preferred toaster setup. So I recommend using the same software that Lee Stranahan prefers to use. Okay, and also by using the 2.0 software, if you do happen to get a hold of his VHS tapes, and they're very good tapes, I highly recommend them, you can follow along with his tutorials, because you'll have the same setup that he has on his system. Okay. Now, the first thing you got to do when you turn on your toaster system is you have to sync the 2 outputs, mainly the program output, with input 1. That has to be done, or else the video toaster will not work. And this is where a lot of you are having problems. You're having problems getting the video toaster to sync up properly, the outputs with input 1. So I'm going to tell you how to do that. The first thing you need to do is you need to have a stable input on input 1. And what I mean by a stable input, you need to have either a professional color video camera or a high quality video camera hooked up to input 1, or something like a Pioneer laser disc player hooked up to input 1, or a very high quality DVD player, or some kind of a sync generator, like a color sync generator or a black burst generator hooked up to input 1. You have to have a stable input on input 1. The toaster requires that at all times. Then, after you have that set up, you have your output 1 goes into your program monitor. Output 2 goes to your preview monitor. Okay, so when you first load up the toaster software, if you see jitters on your monitors, or if your monitors are flickering, I'm talking about after it syncs up and the toaster software comes up, or if you get a toaster not found error, that means you have to do what is called a center frequency adjustment on the toaster. The center frequency adjustment is the most important, most critical adjustment that you can make on your video toaster. It must be done on all versions of the video toaster. All video toasters have to have that procedure done. Well, here's how you do it. You remove the cover. Take the monitor off the top of the Amiga 2000, remove the cover so that you can get to the Amiga 2000, to the video toaster board. And you have to first turn everything back on, have the whole toaster system set up like you would set up for normal use, and you let it run for at least 30 minutes. The whole toaster system, including your video camera or your input going in input 1, has to be thoroughly warmed up before you make this adjustment. Okay, so with the system warmed up, the top cover removed to where you can get to the video toaster, you need to take a jeweler's screwdriver or a tuning, like a TV technician's tuning driver, and you need to adjust the little small variable capacitor that's on the video toaster near the words video toaster. You need to slightly adjust that until the jittering and the flickering goes away on the monitors. Now, after you get it to where it looks pretty good, then you have to get a digital voltmeter, and you have to take the black lead, the negative lead, and you attach that to the bare metal, unpainted metal part of the Amiga 2000, the chassis part of the Amiga 2000. The red lead, or the positive lead from the voltmeter, goes to a solder test blob that is located near the variable capacitor, and it's usually called ERR1. That's where the red lead goes. Now, after you have the two leads connected where they go, you adjust, you fine-tune that variable capacitor while looking at the voltmeter until the voltmeter reads negative 2.1 volts. Then you've got the center frequency adjusted. And at the same time, watch the monitors to make sure that they stay stable, that they don't flicker or jitter. Only after doing this center frequency adjustment will you be able to use your video toaster. Now, if you find that no matter what you do, the monitors still flicker and jitter, then your video toaster probably has a problem and needs to be returned to NewTek for repair. But before you ship your board to NewTek for repair, make sure it's not your Agnes chip. Make sure it's not your Denise chip. Make sure it's not your power supply. Okay? Because even though your Denise and your Agnes chip and your power supply might work properly when you normally use your Amiga, you have to understand that the video toaster really taxes the video circuitry and the power supply in your system. So what may not show up under normal use will show up, when you use the video toaster. Okay, so first, try swapping out the Fat Agnes chip and the Denise chip with known good chips, preferably with chips out of another working video toaster system. Because if it works with another video toaster system, then that Agnes and that Denise chip should work with the system that you're on now. And if you still can't adjust the video toaster, then the toaster is bad, and it needs to be sent back for repair. You also need to make sure it's not your power supply. The video toaster needs a minimum of 200 milliamps on the negative 12 volt line. Now, the average Amiga 2000 power supply puts out up to about 300 milliamps on the negative 12 volt line. Sometimes that voltage might drop below 200 milliamps if your power supply is not really up to spec. If it does, the video toaster will not work properly. You will have problems with it. So before sending the video toaster board back to NewTek for repair, make sure that your Agnes chip is working properly, make sure your Denise chip is working properly, and that your power supply, especially the negative 12 volt line, is putting out enough current and is working properly. Even if you have the Bigfoot power supply installed, make sure it is working properly. Okay. Now, let's say you've successfully done the center frequency adjustment. There's one more thing you need to do before you can use your video toaster. Okay, so go ahead, slide the cover back on the Amiga 2000, put the monitor back on, set it back up the way you normally set everything up. But this time, okay, you leave your input hooked up to input 1, but this time you unhook all BNC connectors, even your preview monitor BNC connector cable, and only leave the program monitor cable hooked up. You unhook the other end of the cable from the monitor and you plug that into the input 4 of the video toaster. In other words, you want the output, program output, going into the input 4 on the video toaster to create like a loop. Then you boot up your Amiga 2000 and you load up you load up a program like Diskmaster or Directory Opus, and you delete the file called HS, which is in the toaster directory. Do not delete the file called HS.default. Do not touch that one. The only file you want to delete, it's called HS, which stands for hardware settings. You want to delete that file from the toaster folder. After you do that, you go to the toaster directory and you run the auto-hue program. And it will auto-hue the video toaster, and it will create a brand new HS file in the toaster folder. The HS file is sort of like the hardware settings configuration file that the toaster uses for setting itself up. What the auto-hue does, it sets up the sync from the output to match the sync coming from the input. It makes sure that the output and input syncs match up. That's basically what the auto-hue does. It also does some color correcting to make sure that your colors are good enough for broadcast production. Because remember, the video toaster, as well as the Amiga, is a broadcast quality computer setup. I mean, it was designed with video production in mind. Okay. So only after you do the center frequency adjustment and you successfully run the auto-hue program, only then will you be able to run your video toaster. And everything will come up just fine. Now, the only time you should have to do this again is if you remove the video toaster from one computer and you put it in another. Or if you move your Amiga from one room to another, because the video toaster is sensitive to temperature changes. So if one of these two situations occur, you will have to do the center frequency adjustment again, and you will have to delete the HS file from the toaster folder, and you will have to run the auto-hue program again to get the toaster to work properly. Now, after you do that, you set the toaster back up the way it's supposed to be set up. You can have a VCR going through a time-based corrector going in the input 2. Always leave your stable input hooked up to input 1. It's usually a camera that's hooked up to input 1. Output 1 goes to your program monitor. Actually, it goes to the video in on a VCR recorder, and then the video out on the VCR goes to your program monitor. Okay, so that you can record the results of the video toaster. Output 2 goes to the preview monitor, so that you can preview what you're doing on the video toaster before sending it to the VCR or program monitor. So that's how you set up, successfully set up a video toaster setup. Now we'll run through that again. Make sure that you have 2 megabytes of chip memory. I would highly recommend using a standard video toaster in an Amiga 2000 computer. I recommend an 040 processor accelerator board with 16 to 32-bit of 32-bit memory. I highly recommend Commodore's A2091 SCSI controller board with the 2 megabytes of memory installed on it for a buffer. And also make sure it has the 7.0 boot ROMs and the Rev 8 SCSI controller chip. And you won't have any problems with your SCSI devices. I recommend at least one time-based corrector. I recommend that you use the 3-monitor setup and 2 VCRs, an input VCR and an output VCR. I recommend a high quality color camera, video camera on input 1. I also recommend, believe it or not, well, at least a 500 megabyte SCSI drive. Not IDE, but SCSI. SCSI is always faster and more efficient than IDE. That's what you want on your SCSI, on your video toaster system. I also recommend the use of an external zip drive. The reason for that is because the little 100 megabyte zip disk is kind of handy for storing toaster fonts, frame stores, and different toaster projects. You can eject one, put in a different one, depending on what kind of work you're doing, what kind of fonts and graphics that you need to work with. So I do highly recommend having an external 100 megabyte zip drive hooked up to your toaster system. That's what I have hooked up on mine. But I do recommend that. So basically, that's it. That's how you successfully set up your video toaster system. And if you have any problems, I welcome you to get in contact with me through. You can email me through the RetroGeekComputers.com website. Anyway, that's it. Until next time, I'm Hans Campbell. This is Retro Geek Computers. Have a nice day.